I'm Mark Halperin.
And I'm John Heilemann. And with all due respect to this presidential campaign, no due respect. We have been saying for months now that the 2016 presidential campaign is a three-ring circus. But with the events of the past 24 hours, it's turned into something darker and even weirder, a kind of carnival grotesque. Two major Republican presidential candidates are snarled in tabloid-quality contretemps. We will get to Ted Cruz's troubles in a moment, but first, the case of the former Breitbart reporter versus Corey Lewandowski took a dramatic turn today. Donald Trump's campaign manager was charged with one count of simple battery by the police department in Jupiter, Florida, which produced this security camera footage. In the highlighted area, you can see Lewandowski behind Breitbart reporter Michelle Fields as a crowd follows Trump after a rally earlier this month. Now, see what it looks like after we zoom in. Again, you see Michelle Fields there in the yellow next to Trump with Lewandowski reaching in from behind.
The charging officer wrote in this police report, Lewandowski, quote, grabbed Fields' left arm with his right hand, causing her to turn and step back. And that, quote, probable cause exists to charge Corey Lewandowski. The Trump campaign responded almost immediately with a statement saying, quote, Mr. Lewandowski is absolutely innocent of this charge. He will enter a plea of not guilty and looks forward to his day in court. He's completely confident that he will be exonerated. Later, Trump himself took to Twitter with several tweets, including one that said, quote, wow, Corey Lewandowski, my campaign manager and a very decent man, was just charged with assaulting a reporter. Look at tapes, nothing there. Then, while campaigning in Wisconsin, Ted Cruz was asked for his reaction to all of this, and he did not hesitate to lash out at the Trump campaign.
It's a very sad development, and this is the consequence of the culture of the Trump campaign, the abusive culture. When you have a campaign that is built on personal insults, on attacks, and now physical violence, that has no place in a political campaign. It has no place in our democracy.
And moments ago, Donald Trump defended Lewandowski in front of news cameras in a way only Trump could have done it, via a press conference from his parked private jet in Janesville, Wisconsin.
I know it'd be very easy for me to discard people. I don't discard people. I stay with people. That's why I stay with this country. That's why I stay with a lot of people that are treated unfairly. And that's one of the reasons I'm the front runner by a lot. If you look at that tape, he was very, very seriously maligned, and I think it's very unfair.
It's only an allegation, but what does it say about the campaign?
I think it says nothing about the campaign. I think if you look at it, he was trying to block her. That's the way I would view it. And she's grabbing me and asking questions. She's not even supposed to ask questions. You know, the press conference lasted for a long time, like 45 minutes. And I was leaving, and she runs up, and you could see, in fact, there are pictures where I could show you some. I actually have some in the other room. But there are pictures where she's grabbing my arm, and I'm going like this, trying to get her off. I think it's a disgrace that something like that could take place, and I'm shocked by it, and I'll stick by people. And I know it's probably not even politically good for me to do, but when somebody is maligned so unfairly as that, I will stick by.
Will his role change at all in the campaign as this case unfolds?
Well, I hope not. I think it's really unfair. It's a very unfair thing to a person. I was watching some of the television coverage, and a lot of people were on television saying, how could somebody be charged for that? I mean, they see it. I'm the one that gave the tapes. Nobody else gave the tapes. The tapes were from me. And they see it, and they see what took place, and it's so minor. And if you look at her initial statements before she knew that we had tapes of her, she was talking about being pulled down or dragged down or something to that effect. And all of a sudden, when she saw that there were tapes, she changed her tone a little bit.
Extraordinary circumstances that neither of us have seen in our career. The frontrunner's campaign manager charged with assault. What are the legal and political implications of this for the Trump campaign?
I just want to pause for a moment and just reflect on that in and of itself. Up there on that wall, there's a picture of you and Dick Morris. Dick Morris got in trouble in 1996 because he got involved in a toe-sucking incident with a prostitute. That was as weird as anything, and as kind of burlesque, grotesque as anything I've seen in our careers covering presidential politics. This is a different thing. There's an allegation of violence here. There's a charge of assault. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what's going to happen with Corey Lewandowski. We're going to talk to a lawyer later on the show about this situation. But just on the legal level, we'll talk about the politics now. At the legal level, problematic, huge.
Innocent until proven guilty, for, like with every American. Trump standing by his campaign manager. In any other campaign, in any other business, at a minimum, he would take a leave of absence, at a minimum. Trump doesn't play by the rules. In this case, it is dangerous for him. He's in a contested situation with Ted Cruz and John Kasich. Trouble with female voters. And there's no escaping the symbolism here.
Yes, well, let's just expand on that. This is the politics of it, right? You now have a situation last week where Donald Trump was getting a hit for the Heidi Cruz photograph that he retweeted, for the notion that he has a problem with women that's getting worse and worse and worse, and now to have your campaign manager charged with assault, whether innocent or guilty, charged with assault of a female reporter, compounds a horrible narrative for him, allows Ted Cruz to get on offense in a powerful way, and raises deep, deep doubts about Donald Trump for any voter going forward about whether this is the kind of thing that a general election would hold if he were the Republican nominee.
Even with the presumption of innocence, and again, there's a video that people see in there, an action. Even with the presumption of innocence, this is a dangerous move for Donald Trump to make.
You can have the presumption of innocence, but the truth is that we can't remember any campaign manager in the past ever being charged, let alone being guilty of assault
and with a video,
on a reporter.
and with the video.
With a video. All right, the Cruz campaign, as I said before, has been dealing with its own reality TV drama after the National Enquirer published a story this weekend saying that Ted Cruz had extramarital affairs with 5 women. Since then, the internet has turned up amateur sleuths trying to find a smoking gun, and reporters on the campaign trail are now asking Cruz point blank about whether rumors of such alleged infidelities are true. Mark, again, we just talked about how Ted Cruz could benefit from the Trump situation, but what are the political implications of this story?
I'll just say we're going to come back to the Corey Lewandowski story throughout the program, so people don't think that's all we're going to say about it.
No, we're not done with that.
A lot more to say.
Yes.
You know, Ted Cruz now, I believe, his campaign is just hoping that the question doesn't come up anymore. That having dodged the question about marital infidelity, he's done talking about it. We'll see. You know, they're all doing a CNN town hall tonight. I suspect Trump will be asked again to address Lewandowski. Cruz may be able to address this. It puts his campaign on pins and needles, and he's got to hope that he can do well enough in Wisconsin and beyond that the page turns. But he is amongst the first candidates to be asked about this in a long while.
This is a very delicate subject, obviously, and going back to Paul Taylor famously with Gary Hart, reporters are always loath to ask. It's not a coincidence that it was someone from the Daily Mail, a British reporter with slightly different standards, who raised it yesterday
The
in
famous
Wisconsin.
"Have you ever?" question.
Have you ever been unfaithful to your wife? It is also notable, and again, presumption of innocence all around. It's also notable that Ted Cruz did not answer the question directly when he was asked yesterday, and so
He answered it the way Bill Clinton would answer such questions.
Correct. He talked about lies, talked about scurrilousness, talked about tabloid trash, but did not just say no or yes. And the only reason I mention it is just that it means the question will continue to be asked. No matter how big the story is. I think it will. I think it will be.
Maybe asked it tonight by CNN. We'll see. All right, when we come back, what happens if Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton lose Wisconsin's primary next week? It could happen. We'll talk about what it would mean after these words from our sponsors. We're going to talk more about the Corey Lewandowski controversy in just a moment, but there is a primary next Tuesday. All 5 presidential candidates, Republicans and Democrats, were in Wisconsin today, fanning out across the state ahead of Tuesday's big showdown for both parties. John and I are just off the plane back from Wisconsin, and one thing was very clear to us while we were there from talking to people in both parties. Both frontrunners, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, could lose in the Badger State on Tuesday, and maybe by a lot. Ted Cruz held rallies today in Brookfield and Cedarburg, and he's scheduled to join John Kasich and Trump at a CNN town hall in Milwaukee this evening. The real news, though, of the day in the race on the Republican side came first thing this morning when Governor Scott Walker talked to influential Milwaukee radio host Charlie Sykes to explain why he decided to endorse his former rival, the Texas senator.
I wanted to make sure that I was supporting someone. I wasn't against something or against someone, but rather being for something, just as I've said many times in campaigns for governor, I want to be for something. And after a lot of time looking at speeches, looking at the records, looking at what the candidates not only say, but what they have done in the past, it was an easy call for me to support Ted Cruz.
Later in the show, we will talk to radio man Mr. Sykes about his interview that he did yesterday with Donald Trump that people are still talking about. And we'll talk to him about the Badger State state of play. But, John, how much is that Walker endorsement going to matter for Ted Cruz now in this last week before the primary.
Well, look, he's a very popular governor. He's obviously
with
Republicans, yeah, in the Republican primary. He's very popular in Wisconsin. It's the most important endorsement in the state. I think that the momentum is with Cruz. I think you and I, over the course of the last 24 to 48 hours, talked to a lot of Republicans who think that Cruz was on the path to winning anyway, but the Walker endorsement will give him that extra boost of momentum. Again, there's a lot of craziness going on in the atmosphere right now, as we can see with Lewandowski, with the allegations of infidelity, but it's obviously good for Ted Cruz.
Yeah, go back to Haley Barbour in politics, good gets better, bad gets worse. If Trump is dealing still with the fallout of Lewandowski being charged and loses his primary and potentially loses it big, it is going to create a very different kind of atmosphere than he's faced in this entire campaign. And it could be what we've discussed he's never had, his first existential moment.
Right. And look, he had another example of another Republican governor who, in a Midwestern state, who in theory should be John Kasich's best friend, someone who Walker could have given Kasich a huge boost here by endorsing him as a real conservative. Instead, he turns away from his fellow governor and endorses Ted Cruz. Again, if it hadn't happened so many other times before, it would be shocking and baffling, but it is part of a trend
Easy
now.
to forget because Walker was such a bad presidential candidate, but he is a great retail politician. It's going to be interesting to see him out on the trail with Cruz.
And a political consultant's feel for his state. He understands like a lot of stuff. All right. Turning now to Brooklynite Bernie Sanders, who even the Clinton campaign admits could execute an upset victory in Wisconsin next week. Sanders' campaign in Appleton this morning. He's holding an event in West Allis later tonight. Mark, with Hillary Clinton's home state of New York coming up later this month, what's the difference now between a narrow Sanders victory and a huge Sanders victory?
Yeah, let's not rule out Hillary Clinton could win the state. The public polling suggests it's close. You and I went to an event of hers last night that did not suggest that she was doing boffo in the state.
And just say, it was a Boys and Girls Club in Milwaukee, the place where she should be doing strongest, didn't even fill the gym. Not even a couple hundred people
Maybe
at most.
300 people being generous.
Bernie Sanders say 3,000 in Appleton. In Appleton.
So if Sanders wins by a little bit, he'll get some momentum coming into New York. If he wins big, more like what he did in New Hampshire than what he did in Michigan, it will give him a lot of momentum because it will beg the question, why is she not doing better in that state?
Well, and look, the argument is now that the correct argument, the delegate math favors Hillary Clinton.
By a lot.
Sanders needs to win big states by big margins if he's going to close the gap. This is a big state, and if he wins it by a big margin, and it's more, and it looks more like New Hampshire than Michigan, it will not just raise the question of why not she's not doing well, but will raise the question of whether he might be able to repeat that in New York, in California, in New Jersey. That suddenly opens the door to Sanders being able to maybe get back in the game.
The Clinton people have been downplaying chances. As we talked about, the Sanders people are basically making it a must-win state. Big win for him there gives him momentum coming into New York. The Clinton people will say, oh, it's another non-diverse state. It's a somewhat diverse state. And it also is a state with labor, and the economy is not as bad recently as it's been in Michigan. So it will show a certain resonance for him. And winning a one-on-one showdown in a one-state contest is a big deal.
If Hillary Clinton had won Michigan, she wouldn't have been talking about its lack of diversity, and the demographics are very similar. So,
all right. Secretary Clinton held a forum on gun violence in Milwaukee this morning, one of 3 campaign events she held in Wisconsin today. But now she is getting out of Dodge. She's going to come here to Gotham City for an event tomorrow at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. The Clinton campaign downplaying her chances in Wisconsin, as we said, and there is mounting suspicion that she will get a real challenge here in New York, primary on April 19th. So my question to you, John, is where is Bill? What are the Clintons up to in Wisconsin? She's leaving the state. He's got nothing scheduled there. Normally, even when the staff says you cannot win this state, they fight like crazy. Keeping the margin down, we both just said, is important. Why are the Clintons not in Wisconsin the rest of the week?
I think you and I both had the same reaction when we were told by various people in Clinton land a few days ago, we think we might lose Wisconsin. We both thought, well, hey, they're spinning that. They're setting themselves up for a comeback victory there. I think we now both think that they're destined to lose it, and the question is how big the margin is. And the fact that Bill Clinton is not going there at all suggests to me that they not only think they're going to lose, but that they're already going to lose by a big margin, and there's no point in deploying him there in a wasted effort.
If you try hard to win and then you still get blown out, it's obviously worse symbolically. That happened to them in New Hampshire. It is tough to me to understand Bill Clinton, though, not fighting. Any state he won in the general election is a state he feels like is his, and he can turn things around. He's done an event already in New York. She's doing an event in New York. I suspect now that they're basically saying, cut our losses in Wisconsin. Hope nobody notices what happens on Tuesday night. Hope it's overshadowed by the Republican race, and shore up New York. Because the fact is, a Sanders win in Wisconsin is a big deal, but if she blows him him out in New York, he's now, again, back without the momentum, headed into those other northeastern states.
And I'll say, look, the public polling suggests she has a big lead in New York. She is, although Bernie Sanders was born in Brooklyn, he's not lived here in a long time. She's been was elected senator twice from this state. It was a while ago, but she still is a New York person. She should win this state. And I think the one place where they are spinning is by suggesting that they think this is going to be super hyper competitive. They know that Sanders is going to fight, but I think they feel more confident that deep down that she actually has a real hold on this state in a way that she does not in Wisconsin at all.
Whether a loss in Wisconsin, whether it's big or small margin,
try to win this one big.
Win in New York and shut the thing down, because again, her delegate lead is very, very tough.
Large and daunting, and that's the pledged delegate lead, not including those superdelegates. All right, up next, the possible trials and tribulations of Donald Trump's campaign manager. We ask criminal defense attorney in Florida what could come next in the case, right after these words from our sponsors. Our first guest tonight is Whitney Boan, criminal defense attorney in Florida, who's been following the battery charge case today against Donald Trump's campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. She joins us now from Orlando. Whitney, hello. Let me just ask you, before we start talking about strategy, tactics, defense versus prosecution, just what is the legal standard? What does Corey Lewandowski have to prove himself that he's innocent, given what we know at this moment?
Well, pursuant to our Constitution, he doesn't have to prove or disprove anything. It'll actually be the burden of the state of Florida to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that each and every element of the offense of battery occurred and that he committed that offense. So he will not have any obligation to put on any evidence tending to prove or disprove anything. However, I would expect him and his lawyers to put on a defense to this and use several different approaches at that Donald Trump has kind of alluded to even already.
You're right to call me on having gotten that thing backwards, and thank you for doing that. What's the prosecutorial standards? What does the prosecution have to prove on the basis of that videotape?
Well, the charge of battery requires that they prove that either Lewandowski actually and intentionally touched Fields against her will or without her consent, or they can prove it by showing that Lewandowski actually and intentionally caused bodily harm to Fields. They don't have to prove both. I know there's been some tweeting by Fields about bruises and such. They don't have to actually even prove that she was hurt, that she was bruised. It really only requires that there was an actual and intentional touching and that it was against her will.
Do you know the prosecutor?
That's all that they really have to prove.
Do you know the prosecutor in this case?
I do not.
Okay. So
Jupiter is a little ways away.
Okay, I'm just curious because obviously, don't want to minimize the complaint that was made, and the charge is a serious charge, but there's obviously unwanted touching, a variety of sorts that occurs in Florida, including in that jurisdiction every day. So do you think, speculate here, that the prosecutor felt, because there was a video, because it's high profile, the prosecutor felt that he or she had to bring the case, even though it normally would not be brought under those circumstances?
I'm not even sure that it would not usually be brought under those circumstances, but I think that it would be foolish of me to say and not credible that the politics of this and the huge public spectacle that's going on with the Trump campaign probably didn't play heavily into the impetus of doing this and pursuing these charges.
If you were Corey Lewandowski's counsel in this case and he said to you, look, I got to make this thing go away as quickly as possible, do you think you could plead this thing out pretty quickly?
I'm sure he could. I mean, honestly, he may be eligible for a pretrial diversion program.
What would he have to plead to, do you think, to get it to go away?
Well, he might not even have to plea. I don't know that jurisdiction's policies about pretrial diversion, but many jurisdictions throughout our state have programs such as pretrial diversion that state attorneys will often refer cases to, such as a misdemeanor battery like this. It might involve that she would have to agree with that referral. It would probably include an anger management class, some period of supervision, but at the end of that program, the charges could be dropped. If he's not eligible for that, it's very likely, if he has no criminal history, which I'm assuming that he does not, that he could enter a plea to something like a withhold of adjudication of guilt and court costs, where he would not be even convicted formally of the charges. It would be on his record, so to speak, but he wouldn't be convicted.
And just to clarify one thing quickly and turn you back over to John, when you say she'd have to agree, is that as a matter of law or just the reality of a prosecutor in a case like this?
It's usually the reality of the prosecution in terms of like the policies within state attorneys' offices because of the public policy in terms of not wanting to do things like that in violent crimes that are against the will of victims. Right. It's not hard and fast by law.
Let me go back to the question I asked before, which was, according to you, the prosecutorial standard here is basically says that if he engaged in unwanted touching without her consent, that he can be guilty of battery, right? The video is what Correct. It is. You've looked at the video, you've stared at it, right? So if Corey Lewandowski yes. called you and said, here's what the video shows, what should my strategy be? Is it smart for me, Corey Lewandowski, to go out and say I'm innocent when, at least on the basis of the standard that you just suggested, it seems hard to claim that he's innocent if that's the standard?
It breaks my criminal defense attorney heart when I hear about all this tweeting and this talking about it. Everyone needs to be quiet. I do victims advocacy too. I can tell you, even on her part, she probably needs to stop talking about it too, especially in such a public forum. Donald Trump's comments, as much as it pains me to say this, are not that troubling to me, and I wouldn't be shocked if there was some defense tactic there, and even having him kind of publicly come out and talk about this in the way that he has today. Right. I don't like that Lewandowski's talking about it. I don't think that helps. Any statement he makes can be used against him in court.
Just talk a little bit
He's
more.
A party opponent.
Talk a little bit more about what you just said about Trump's comments. Why you think those are different than Lewandowski's comments?
Well, I think that they're different because I mean we can't pretend like there's not a political forum going on here and there's not a greater political discussion. And honestly, I don't know that it would have been my tactic to allow him to make comments like that. But truthfully, Lewandowski's attorneys probably don't have any control over Trump. If they conferred about it, though, I don't think his comments were really that troubling. I tend to agree with him in terms of watching the video. I find it to be a de minimis touching. I find it to be something that we would see commonly in press conferences in terms of kind of the hype and the amount of people and everyone's running around and everyone's chasing after the subject who they want to speak to. But I did not find what appeared on the video to be consistent with what she has said in terms of ending with severe bruises or being pulled down to the ground. And Trump kind of made comments that I would have expected to make in a court of law if I was representing Lewandowski.
Right.
So it'll be interesting.
So that would be the core of your defense if you were actually the counsel to Corey Lewandowski. That's how you would try to defend yourself, given what we've seen on tape. We have about 30 seconds here.
What I would have to do is argue that this was not unconsensual, right. That this was not something that someone wouldn't have expected or that wouldn't be normal in the course of the facts and circumstances surrounding these individuals at the time this happened.
Thank you very much. We got to go. Coming up, the conservative radio host who Donald Trump didn't hang up on yesterday, Charlie Sykes, joins us to talk from Wisconsin next.
I do apologize. I believe in apologizing, but I think I think before I would think about apologizing, he owes me an apology because what he did was wrong. Again, I didn't start it. He started it. If he didn't start it, it would have never happened. Nothing like this would have ever happened. But he started it. So,
but I would remember, we're not on.
You just said it's fine with
me. We're not on a playground. We're running for president of the United States.
I agree with that 100%. Right. And my views are not playground views.
That was an audio clip from Donald Trump's interview from yesterday that people are still talking about with Right Wisconsin radio host Charlie Sykes, who John and I spent time with in Milwaukee this morning, and now he joins us electronically from Milwaukee. Mr. Sykes, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
I want to ask you first about the Lewandowski thing and how you think that will play in the context of the primary a week away for voters in Wisconsin.
Well, it's not going to help Donald Trump because it plays into the narrative of the way his campaign behaves, the way they treat women, and this pattern that they've created where they will never, ever just simply apologize. This whole thing just simply would have gone away if Corey Lewandowski would have said, hey, I'm really sorry, I apologize for this. Or if they had not followed up by trying to trash this woman the way they are. But they've created this brand where apparently they've decided that any sort of apology, any sort of acknowledgement that they've done something wrong is perceived as weakness. So in some ways, they back themselves into a corner.
Charlie, you've been beating up Donald Trump for months. Just talk to us a little bit about how you felt when you learned that you were going to be interviewing Donald Trump and what you did to prepare for that interview.
Well, I have to admit that when I sat down at in the radio studio at 8:30, we're scheduled to talk with him at 8:35, I thought there was about a 50-50 chance that he would come up, because I figured there had to be somebody in his campaign that would spend maybe 15 seconds looking at my Twitter feed, which is pretty much an anti-Trump manifesto. It wouldn't have taken a lot to figure out. I'd actually posted an article, yes, conservative talk radio is different in Wisconsin. So I was a little bit surprised that he, that they never did any of that vetting. What I did was simply to ask him the questions that have been running around in my head for the last 6 months, which was to ask someone who wants to be the president of the United States whether there's going to be some moment where you say, I've got to stop the juvenile tweets, whether or not this would be a moment coming into Wisconsin where we value civility and decorum a little bit, whether you might want to say, okay, you know what, let's just leave the wives out of it, and he wasn't going to budge.
Second day in a row, you're dominating the news. Scott Walker announced his endorsement of Ted Cruz on your program this morning. That endorsement gets a lot of news coverage today when they campaign together, as they're expected to later in the week. That'll get coverage. Is Scott Walker the kind of governor who comes with an organization? Does he help on the ground turn out the vote now that he's turned his support towards Cruz?
Yes, it actually does, and I'm a skeptic about the power of endorsements at this particular level. But I was a little bit surprised that Walker came out as strongly pro-Cruz as he did. I thought maybe he would make a tactical vote as opposed to a full-throated endorsement. So what he's done is he has sent a signal to the highly motivated, highly engaged electorate in southeastern Wisconsin that it's okay to support Ted Cruz, that he is their guy, and I think that's going to help. Just as important, though, was Donald Trump's apparently just knee-jerk reaction that he was going to lash out and attack Scott Walker. Trust me, that is weapons-grade stupid, in this particular state, because you have to remember, Republican primary voters have crawled through glass, have walked through fire through these recall elections for Scott Walker. So to come into Wisconsin and attack Scott Walker for not raising taxes in a Republican primary is it's just not going to play well for Donald Trump.
Charlie, if there hadn't been the Corey Lewandowski story today, we might be spending a lot more time. We talked about it a little bit, but we might be spending a lot more time talking about Ted Cruz and the accusations about marital infidelity. He was asked about that point blank yesterday in Wisconsin. How much do you think those accusations hurt him, or conceivably could hurt him in Wisconsin?
I think probably in the short term less than you might think, because there's just no there. If there was something tangible, if there was some credible source, that they might raise some doubts. Or if there was a stronger candidate. The reality is that John Kasich could have been the unsullied third choice, but that it doesn't seem to be playing out that way in Wisconsin. And the reality is that National Enquirer just doesn't carry that much weight without some sort of more credible media evidence.
Let's take it away from Senator Cruz, and I want to know how you feel about the famous "Have you ever?" question. Do you think that's a question candidates for the presidency should be asked and should answer about infidelity?
Well, it's inevitable. You know what? I mean, we've all lived through the whole Clinton era, and I think that there was a certain recognition at the end of that you know what? Voters are not going to decide on personal lives. Now, on the other hand, if you have run as a pious, born-again Christian evangelical candidate like Ted Cruz, it would be so inconsistent with that it would be hard to imagine him surviving. But at this point, I do think that you have to leave the private lives, leave the family aside, unless you have something that's actually tangible and newsworthy. And I think that this is just another one of the, pieces of evidence that we have debased the political dialogue here in this campaign, and that the fact that rather than talking about the fundamental issues that you thought we might talk about this year, trade, the future, why people are unhappy with the country, we're down to talking about what Donald Trump is tweeting about, who he is insulting, whether or not you have a presidential candidate who somehow is enabling an aide who might be abusing women. All of these things, which are, again, part of this bizarre campaign that we're in.
Charlie, we know from having talked to you earlier that you think Ted Cruz is likely to win the Republican primary in Wisconsin. On a scale of 1 to Godzilla, how confident about that are you?
Well, I've been wrong so often, like so many people have been this year, so I'm not going to say 10. We're going to have a poll tomorrow, the Marquette University Law Poll, which tends to be the gold standard. But I'm reasonably confident. I'm going to put myself at an 8 on a scale of 10, because I think that Ted Cruz is going to do very, very well in southeastern Wisconsin, you know, the WOW counties, Waukesha, Ozaukee, Washington counties, where Scott Walker is very strong. I think that Donald Trump is likely to do better in the western part of the state, western, northwestern part of the state. Battleground is going to be Green Bay. But I do think that what you're seeing is a coalescing of conservatives behind Ted Cruz. John Kasich just is not catching on. I think that Wisconsin voters are making that tactical decision. It's a binary choice between Trump and Cruz, and I think that the endorsement by Walker today kind of solidifies that. So at this point, I'd be surprised if Ted Cruz doesn't win. But then I've been surprised before this campaign.
Mr. Sykes, a fella could get used to spending morning and evening with you. Thanks so much for the time on both ends of the day.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Up next, Brian Fallon from Team Clinton talks about the news of the day, including Donald Trump's campaign manager being charged. We'll also talk to him about the prospects of a Gotham City debate between Sanders and Clinton. If you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can now listen to us on the radio in Washington on Bloomberg 99.1 FM, and we'll be right back.
Well, as Boss is campaigning in Wisconsin today, we are joined here in New York by Hillary Clinton's press secretary, Mr. Brian Fallon. Brian, thank you for coming back on the show. The Sanders campaign has been agitating over the question of a debate with your boss in this state, New York State. Why will you guys not accept that debate right off the top? It should be home field advantage for you.
Well, this was a little bit of a tempest in a teapot that has played out the last 36 hours. You know, we were the ones back in February that had said that we were willing to do more debates. And so I think that what threw this process for a loop was just the fact that the Sanders campaign decided to issue a letter publicly, because there's usually a process here where the campaigns will work together privately through the DNC and come up with a debate schedule. And so we've always intended to go through that process. We're going through that process now. There have been back-channel conversations throughout the day today. Our campaign indicated to the Sanders campaign through the DNC that we're perfectly willing to debate in April, and we've provided some options, including here in New York.
Right, so New York is on the table for Hillary Clinton.
There's going to be
a debate,
discussion.
not a forum, but an actual debate, like a standard issue debate.
A debate like we've had several so far
here in New York City.
Let me just press you a little bit more on this. Given how anxious they are to do it in New York and eager they are to do it here, are you all willing to bend to that? I know there are other options, but are you now, if they want to do New York, you'll happily do New York, or that's still a subject of debate?
I think that they're going to have to work together to figure out dates and locations. We've said that we're willing to do New York among other options. There's also some important states that are voting on the 26th at the end of the month, including Pennsylvania, which is a big delegate-rich state where the Sanders campaign will also need to do well in if they're going to seriously vie for the nomination. But she's perfectly willing to debate in New York among other places, so if they can find a mutually agreeable date in the next couple weeks before New York, I think it could happen.
Is there any downside to debating in New York?
I don't think so.
No, so you're happy to do it?
Sure.
I'd like to offer just for now, like right here.
Yeah.
This is would be a good spot for that.
Good temperature here.
We got four chairs here.
You need to figure it out with Jeff Weaver, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Charlie Baker.
We'll be calling all three of you in just a moment.
I'm calling them now.
Just your view as a political professional of the notion of a campaign manager being charged with battery, and whether Donald Trump standing by his campaign manager, you think both as a matter of politics and morality is the right thing to do?
Well, look, I'm not going to comment on the specific charge because there'll be a process here, a legal process, and he'll get his say and his opportunity to defend himself.
Former Justice Department.
There is due process, but obviously it's a very serious charge, and the fact that it's been charged suggests that there's some evidence to back it up. And but the most I will say is to make an observation about the campaign generally, which is that Mr. Trump has clearly created a culture that not just condones violence, but actually goads it on, and that's true of his supporters at rallies where he offers to pay legal fees, and it seems also that he condones it to a certain degree among his staff, and that's very troubling.
Does the fact that the campaign manager is a male and the alleged victim is a female, Does that say anything to you about the culture of the campaign that you'd like to comment on?
Well, look, I don't want to comment on the particular incident, but obviously there's a troubling trend on the part of the Trump campaign. This is not a one-off. This was not even the most recent allegation that has arisen with respect to conduct at their events. So I think that says it all by itself in terms of the fact that this is a recurring problem at Trump events.
But Brian, you're a human being, right? You've watched the video, right? Everybody's watched the video, right?
Yeah.
We've all watched the video. We had someone on just now who was a Trump critic, a defense attorney, who watched the video and said that looked like de minimis contact. So when you watch that video, does that look troubling to you, or does that look like something that should be the cause of a criminal prosecution?
Sure, it's troubling. And the fact that it, like I said, the fact that it made it all the way to formal charges says something. But again, there will be a process here that plays out, and he will get his opportunity to defend himself. I don't want to prejudge that. That's not my place. But it's something that the campaign's going to have to answer for, both in the specific sense and in a general sense.
Just let me ask you one quick last thing on this. Mark earlier said that most day of the campaign, if the campaign manager were charged in that way, they would at least take a leave of absence, right? So if Robbie Mook was charged in a similar kind of case, would that be something where you would just, as a matter of form, the campaign manager would step aside for a little while?
That's such a wild hypothetical that is completely not at all something that would ever happen in our campaign. Like I mentioned a couple weeks ago when the incident first happened, that our campaign manager, his idea of what he likes to do when he's not back crunching numbers back in the office is he goes door to door knocking to convince people, do persuasion of voters on behalf of his candidate. He's not out in the crowd serving as a bouncer or enforcing crowd control. That was a strange thing.
Wisconsin primary is really important, right?
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton, no plans as far as we know to go back in the state. Bill Clinton hasn't been there. Chelsea Clinton hasn't been there since last week. Why are your principals and your candidate not campaigning more in Wisconsin before the primary?
Well, Wisconsin's important, but all the states that are coming up are important. And the New York primary on the 19th, she's going to basically kick off her campaign in New York tomorrow with an event
but that's
at the Apollo
over 2
Theater.
weeks away.
Here's why I think the New York primary looms large.
Yeah.
The Wisconsin primary, I think there's a lot of reasons why he's going to be probably quite competitive there. I think that on balance, no matter who wins, delegate-wise, it'll be a wash. It won't significantly alter the trajectory of the race. The New York contest, however, on the 19th, that is one of the 4 remaining big delegate-rich states where if he is not winning and winning big, then we can effectively say that the race is over.
So yes or no, between now and next Tuesday's Wisconsin primary, will a Clinton set foot in Wisconsin? Yes or no?
I'm not sure. I think it's possible that one of the family members could go, or Hillary Clinton herself could go. But as of tomorrow, we'll be here in New York, and we're balancing our priorities, in order to win the nomination. And that means not just looking ahead to the very next state, but looking across the chessboard at all the places.
You'd like there to be a debate in New York, you personally, right?
Yeah.
It would be less travel.
I got one more, though, on this Wisconsin thing, right? You guys have been saying, well, again, according to the math, that Bernie Sanders needs to win big, important states by huge margins if he was ever going to close the delegate gap, right? What would be a margin that Bernie Sanders would win by in Wisconsin that would actually cause you concern? What would that number have to be?
See,
don't just say big. Give me a number that would freak you out.
Well, here's the point. What Bernie Sanders has yet to prove is that he can win big in a delegate-rich, diverse state. Right. Wisconsin is not going to change that narrative.
Bernie Sanders wins by 80 points.
If he wins Wisconsin,
it wouldn't bother you.
If he wins Wisconsin, even significantly, it does not portend necessarily anything with respect to
no matter how big
a state like New York or California.
Right.
We're going to break. Hold your hand up like this. Let me see if it's shaking. Just hold it up.
I'm not going to fall for that.
All right, Brian Fallon. Brian Fallon, I like the fact you just pre-spun a 50-point Sanders victory as being utterly meaningless. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Also giving us that little piece of news. Up next, we'll play a game of GOPRT with Dan Senor after this.
This is Geo Purdy, introducing today's contestant, a Republican strategist from New York City, Dan Senor. And now, here are the hosts of Geo Purdy, Mark Halperin and John Heilemann.
Thanks, Johnny. Dan Senor is our returning champion. Dan, welcome back.
Hey, returning champion, and I've knocked out all the other competitors, right?
All the other people
who played.
Only one other person has ever played. No other person has ever played.
Right. But I'm just saying, process of elimination.
Let's go to the big board, pick a category, pick a question, and we'll go to it.
I'll start where I left off, which is Rubio. Remembering Rubio.
Remembering Rubio for
alliteration there. I'll go for 1,000.
Remembering Rubio for 1,000. All right.
With Rubio, you're like
this is what caused the downfall of Marco Rubio's presidential campaign.
There's no one thing. Can I present?
Don't forget to do it in the form of a question.
Right. So, right. Of course, I know this.
What
is the effect of $35–40 million in super PAC money being run against you when virtually no money was being run against any other candidate that cranked up Rubio's negatives.
So what are negative ads?
What are negative ads?
Yeah.
What is a fragmented, crowded field? Right? He was running against 3 other senators, 3 very popular governors. Kasich, Walker.
All right, next. All right. We'll give you the 1,000.
Wow. Okay. So you want to keep this moving? All right. I'll just.
We got to keep it going. You were also answering a totally banal way, so we're moving along.
Corey's story.
The Corey story for 500 or 1,000.
You always say for how much? You like 1,000?
Yeah, I'm gonna go for 1,000.
Yeah. All right. Corey Lewandowski has this % chance of remaining Donald Trump's campaign manager.
Oh, 100%.
100%.
In the form of a question.
Sorry.
What is
100%?
100%?
Yes, 100%.
There's no way, even if he's
What if he's convicted or has to go to trial?
Okay, sorry. If he's convicted or has to go, if he's convicted, I think if he goes to trial, he sticks with him. I think if he's convicted, maybe he gets rid of him.
Maybe. All right.
Let me just say.
Yeah.
This was obviously, they should have just put out a statement to this Breitbart reporter very early on and simply said, we apologize, sorry for the confusion.
Not the Trump way. Pick something else.
All right, I'll do 500 for Corey's story.
All right, 500. Donald Trump should have done this when his you sort of already said this.
I've answered it.
All right, pick something else. Pick something else.
I'll do lamestream media for $500.
All right, candidates who want as much free media as Donald Trump has gotten should be doing this to get more airtime on TV for themselves.
There is no other option? There's no other options. In other words,
there's nothing they can do to get airtime?
Unfortunately, in this cycle, unless you get in the gutter with Donald, you don't get any more airtime.
I need you to go right now to conventional wisdom for 1,000.
Really?
Yeah.
I was going to do lamestream
go right to
media.
that. We're running out of time.
We're done with the lamestream media.
Who's right?
All right, conventional wisdom.
Is what will happen in Cleveland when the Republican convention is contested.
Did you hear the question?
Yeah.
That's a video daily
Kristol?
double.
That's
William
impressive.
from Washington.
William Kristol.
So, did you hear his question?
Yeah. What will happen in Cleveland when the Republican convention is contested?
Yeah.
I think Bill Kristol puts his name in contention, and what is Bill Kristol for president?
What is the Kristol candidacy?
What is the rationale for the Kristol candidacy? I know you think it is going to be Paul Ryan.
Your friend.
My friend. I'm a huge fan. The country would be well served by him running for president. I don't think he'll put his name in contention. I think there'll
just like he wasn't going to put his name in contention for vice president.
Yeah, there's no precedent for Ryan
it is
saying
true.
he won't.
Paul Ryan says he refuses to do something,
and then usually does it. It's like, I will not eat those Wheaties tomorrow morning. And
there'll be 5, 6, 7. I get one more. All right, I'll do. Lamestream media. What was my last one? You didn't let me do lamestream media.
1,000.
Yeah.
1,000 for the lamestream media. Okay. In the ongoing war between Donald Trump and Fox News, this side will win.
Who is Fox News?
Really?
They'll win.
Really? In what way?
Because after November, Donald Trump will not be a candidate for president of the United States, and he won't be a president-elect for president of the United for the office. Fox News will still be standing. It'll be one of the most dominant platforms in our modern media. So Fox News is still standing after November. The Trump candidacy is not.
Who's won so far?
I would still say Fox is
I like the notion that it's conditional, though, because, of course, if Trump becomes president, like you were saying, Fox News will still have won.
No, if Trump becomes president, it'll be like Putin. It's like Obama said last night, where Putin, edits the articles. Trump will start shutting down media outlets. So
that's Pravda.
Fox will be Pravda.
Who is Dan Senor? He is our once, future, and reigning champion of this game. Dan, thank you.
I forgot the rules. You're right about asking the question.
Yes, we'll review them next time. All right, we'll be right back after this. Thanks, Dan, with Who Won the Day.
All right, Mark. So this day, who won it?
Whoever the Democratic nominee for president is, because the Republican brand is now in a little bit of trouble.
I got to say, the one potential person, Bernie Sanders, who also just got the Hillary Clinton campaign to agree to a debate in New York, which is what they wanted.
Yeah, Brian Fallon didn't go all the way, but it's clear that I think
it's happening. It's on
here in New York.
New York City,
or New York State at least. All right, check out Josh Edelson's great narrative about how the push for a $15 minimum wage went from a fringe hope to a mainstream movement. Coming up on Bloomberg West, Corey Johnson speaks to Congressman Darrell Issa from California about the debate over encryption. Thanks for watching. John will be back tomorrow with more on all of this. Pretty big day. Tomorrow will be another one.
Oh, it's going to be a big day, all right. I'm going to be with Donald Trump, I believe, in Wisconsin.
We'll see you from Wisconsin. Until tomorrow, Sayonara.